Monday mornings don't usually come with optimism. They come with alarms, traffic, and the quiet math we do inside our heads. How much effort for how much return? In South Africa, that question can feel even more heavy because effort doesn't equal opportunity. Talent doesn't always equal access. And doing the right thing doesn't always feel rewarded. And yet, everywhere you look, people are building. Not just businesses, but lives, families, communities, living legacies. This episode is not about the billionaire. It's about the everyday you and me, the everyday success story, the small businesses, the mom and dads, the family members, the communities. It's about us and how we leverage our day to build legacy. Because greatness isn't reserved for the CEOs. It's how you show up as a parent. It's how you show up as a person in your community, for those in need, and even for those who are building businesses. Today, I get to share the story of someone who I believe is making impact on the African continent, but also here in South Africa, and who has a heart for people showing up as the best and equipping them to do so themselves. My guest today is Clint Higgins, someone who's working behind the scenes in shaping businesses and people to move from survival to success. But more than just titles, Clint understands something that is so South African. Progress is really loud, but it is possible. Welcome to Things We Learn on a Monday Morning. I hope you'll enjoy this episode, and let's dig in. So Clint, before we dive into the multitude of questions, I know we've done the intro, but unpack to the audience, who is Clint? Who is Clint Higgins, and how did you come to find yourself in the type of work that you do?
Yeah, I think for me, I had to step back and to really ask that hard question: who is Clint Higgins in the 2026 year even of my life? And it was really around he's an economic inclusion specialist, right? And economic inclusion is vast. It's about how do we create segues and pathways for people, and it actually stems from a 20-year journey in the corporate world, right? This year, I'm still under 40, but it's my 20th year of work in the work environment. So it's really taking all of that years of experience and saying, how do we create an inclusive opportunities and an economy, if you look at it from a greater context, was really where it stemmed from.
Yeah, I guess you brought up the word inclusion, and I know that's the heart of, I guess, the essence of what today's topic is about, because that word gets thrown around so much. As a buzzword, it's sometimes a cop-out. But I think my question to you would be, when you hear positive stories about South Africa, because I know, South Africa in the media has been it's a yo-yo experience. Either we the best place to be in, we're winning awards, the best city to be in, or we the worst. What do you think we often overlook as South Africans, and why do these stories matter to ordinary people, not just business leaders?
I think the reality is we don't want to believe the best in ourselves. And so sometimes it's so easy to just tap into what is being consistently driven through a media. The media loves having a negative story. It obviously hypes up, people read more sells more papers, gets more news, hits. But I think it's we are cynical, and I think we haven't really tapped into the fact that our stories carry power. We often quickly acclimate to the next in terms of who we're supposed to be. Where I believe the story is what can carry you, and your story is positive. If I look at the everyday South African, everyone has a hero's journey. Everyone has walked a path that many people would have died on. And so it's so sad because what consistently happens is we tap into that, not sharing that story. And that's a story that ultimately would be the journey that other young people or other people in the country can follow. And so for me, it's really that really shapes how that thinking is always driven through the media. But also just we adapt our ideology. We stop and we don't share that beautiful journey. So I think it's about that's really important.
Yeah, I mean, you raise a valid point, because I guess the next follow-up question would have been, why do we struggle to believe good news about ourselves? And I think Because I know the world has changed, everything has changed, but there's something uniquely South African that we we can laugh at ourselves, but we can also complain a lot. But we also love this crab in a barrel mentality, and it seems like that seems to penetrate. But why do you think that's so prevalent in our nation or prevalent with our people?
I just think people don't understand who they are sometimes, right? And so it's easy to say like, let's not do it instead of saying let's try and do it and figure out that we potentially could. So I think it's that diffusion where people say, I'd rather have a negative perception, I'd rather frame it negatively than have a positive framing. Like often I never knew what to do, but then I wake up and I say like, but I have this gift, I have that gift, and today I'm going to just operate in the gift of my conversational skills, of my high enthusiasm, of my superpower to do hard things. So I think
Yeah,
that's for me a critical reason why people don't share.
yeah, wow, brilliant. I think that's something that I guess we as South Africans, and I'm talking about all races. There's not any race things. This is a South African condition. I think we need to tap into our storytelling abilities and start to tell each other stories and champion it rather than just hold a mirror to it. I don't know. Okay, you mentioned a little bit about economic inclusion, and I know with your 20-year journey in corporate and now making the shift to being a serial entrepreneur, I know you've always had it. By the way, people, I know Clint beyond this. This is not the first time you're meeting him, so spoiler alert. So I know a little bit about him. But I know with all that years of experience in business and helping other people develop businesses, in particular, the word economic inclusion comes out, and it sounds so big and abstract. And I know you've had to deal with it and had to use it as well. But what does it actually mean in the life of someone who isn't running a company, and for those who are running a company, someone working, someone studying, someone trying to get ahead? What does economic inclusion actually mean?
I think it's taking your place in society, be that in your school, in your academics, in your work environment, be an inclusive participant in the economy, and that's what we really often don't see. Where do I fit into that economy? You made a very good statement around the fact that I've worked with businesses, built millionaires, and the reality is I wasn't part of the economic inclusion because I didn't see myself as a business within that economy. And so the shift had to happen where I had to allow myself to say that I'm a business in the economy and I need to contribute, I need to make changes. And all of those incremental changes of every person that's actively involved in economic activity, be that schools, be that education, be that academics, all of those have facets of economics in them. The world runs on economics. And so once we start understanding everything is driven by that demand and supply, you will then ultimately take up your space. And that was the big change for me, was because I saw it as a greater system. It wasn't just one dimension. It's got multifacets. So I think that is really key if you look at economic inclusion. Often in South Africa, it's just seen as businesses wanting an opportunity. But I'm saying it's about the paving the way for the opportunity, understanding the psychology of the business and the entrepreneur, understanding what they really need to be the best they can be. And it's not one dimensional. And that's why the work we do within the space of economic inclusion speaks to mentorship, coaching, business support, business development, and execution. Because you often have great businesses that can do, or they can do it on paper, but they can't execute. We have phenomenal businesses that can execute, but on the compliance and the paper lens, they often struggle the most. So for us, it's really how do we bring everything together and change the paradigms for business owners and everyone around economic inclusion.
Brilliant point. Because I mean, as you're speaking, what sparks in my mind is how does a guy owns a spaza shop in the community versus someone who runs a multi-million rand tire company, for instance, selling tires. So how does economic inclusion look different for both of those things? And because you said something so profound. We need to look at ourselves not just as business owners, but people who are contributing to the economy, not just someone who's living hand to mouth. And I think so. If you had to, I guess my question: if you're looking at those two paradigms, spaza shop versus multi-million rand business, how does inclusion show up or fail in that space? Or could you shed some light on that? Yeah.
I think it's two dimensional. I think it's also great to look at it from a different lens. I think it's being able to see who you are, the spaza shop owner, and I grew up in an environment where there was multiple independent spaza shops, right? And today, when I look back at that, and I'm asking myself, why couldn't those people come together and form a spaza a cooperative that allows them to pool their money together to get better gains when they buy from the wholesaler. No, everyone paid one independent driver to drive them because they never owned vehicles, right? One
Yeah.
gentleman drove different shops at different times where it could have been one fuel cost for everyone. So I think once they understood economics and purchasing power, they would really understand where they fit in. The challenge we have is that businesses or smaller businesses aren't open to upskilling themselves. They're not open to reading, they're not open to understanding the business concept. They are actually a business. And once they don't see themselves as a business, and you'd see me distinctly use this word, not small business, because I've also now adapted this analogy that small business shapes your paradigm in terms of I'm small, I'm a business. So too, there's that big tire business look at itself as part of a bigger value chain, saying we supply tires. We have 3 stores. However, we've just seen one of the bigger conglomerates get into the market. How do we become a franchisor in that chain to allow for us to get the benefits of getting a product at a lower cost, which means we can pass the value on to the customer, which means we can sell more. So both parties have a unique role to play, but it's how they see themselves. And so it's about that shift in your mindset where even if you start the business today, you can't introduce yourself as a small business all the time, because how do I perceive you? I perceive you as a lack of, you potentially have a lack of credibility, a lack of reliability, and a lack of execution muscle. And so once you start believing the best in terms of who you are, you'd show up that way. You'd also start applying the best principles in your business. So I think that's how I see it in its entirety.
Yeah, no, a valid point. I think it's how you position is how you perceived. So so if you like, brilliant thing of small business, saying you're a small business. If that is your mindset, that you remain a small business, because there'll come a time where scaling needs to happen or outside the scope of a small business. You say, I'm a small business, I can't do it, or you just live in the space. Unless you want to be a small business, that's fine. But unless but unfortunately, sometimes the labels we adopt is the labels we perform under, in essence. I think many South Africans are hardworking, and you and I know as business owners, and it's one of those crazy things about being South Africa. The good thing is that we can, with legislation, it's a bit different to the rest of the world, so we're able to do stuff, but also it's harder to operate in this space. I'm not going to lie. But from your experience, what matters more than effort? And how can people position themselves better without burnout? Now, I know we've spoken about burnout prior to this conversation. We've walked the journey. So burnout is a thing. As an entrepreneur, it is burnout. And I know you've applied a few things in your life with your family to mitigate the burnout, the potential burnout that could come. But like, what matters more than effort? And how can people position themselves better without burning out?
I think firstly understanding that burnout was a thing that stems from our parents. We saw our parents performing on a level that was phenomenally great all the time, and they often came home and they were burnt out and they didn't understand that. And we always saw them as busy, and so we thought busy equals productive equals more money in the bank. And so when we came into the corporate environment or the work environment, I adopted the same ideology. However, I think what matters more is being able to say the amount of effort, or the least amount of effort and the highest amount of return. So I've adopted that philosophy. Lesser effort with high returns. There were certain days I was super busy, but it didn't result in money in my bank account. There were days when I was not busy, someone would call me, they need something, and I would apply minimal effort because I've had prepared certain things for that pathway, submit the proposal, submit the information, and it returns with high amounts of efforts. So I started understanding that maybe my logic around business was incorrect. I thought I had to be busy. I thought I had to be there at 8 o'clock. I thought I had to leave at 7 o'clock in the evening. But now I have flipped it around and saw, like, how do I look at my opportunities differently? And how do I have a conversation around and understanding that this amount of effort is going to yield this amount of return. So I always look at the return in mind. And unfortunately, a lot of people say, like, you shouldn't look at the return. I'm now at a point where I'm like, whatever makes the bank account go ching, I am there for that at the right amount of time. Because there was times where I provided free advisory services. I spent time with businesses. I was more invested in their businesses than they were invested in their own businesses, which meant
Sure.
I took up the burden. So for me, the flip was really saying lesser effort, higher return. It is contrary to a lot of models, but I'm applying that over the last 2 months, and it's seemingly more positive than it has been before in terms of my
Yeah.
test.
But I guess this is kind of a framework or a systems thinking in business that you're applying. And I think, how do people engage with this type of thinking or type of system without feeling powerless? Because obviously there's a previous narrative that has driven their way of life. This is not only for business people. This is for people in general. I know sometimes I felt when I've not done enough work in my mind, I felt like I was cheating the system or stealing from myself. So I guess my question is, like, how do you help people engage with this type of thinking, embrace it without feeling powerless?
I think it's about a plan, right? So in any business, you need a roadmap. You need to know what income you need to generate in that business to be able to sustain yourself. And once you have the number down, if you meet the number, you've met your target, and now you exceed your target by 20 to 30% per month. That's good and positive. And if you're going to push for 50 to 60%, that's going to give you lesser influence in the new month because you're going to be tired. You're not going to have the same vigor. So I've looked at it sort of so incremental increases, right? So month one, that's the number. Month two, that's the number. Month three, that's the number. So incrementally, my efforts will also increase as the number goes up. But also, it's going to come a point where there's something around the sort of the diminishing returns, right? So when am I going to operate on my full capacity and have less of impact? And that's when I start looking at expansion in my business, in the consultancy. That's when I look at saying how many staff members come on board for these sort of functions to ensure that I'm freed up because I'm the thinker. So what I've done is sort of understood what is the resources that is needed. How do I get to that point, and what is my maximum cap? So when I'm at my maximum caps, then that's when I look at expansion. Because a lot of businesses, they get to the maximum cap and that's where they stay. So they're operating on a high stress, high frequency, high energy here. And that's actually expansion zone, right? You should expand there to free your mind up so you can actually run the expansion. So a lot of times they get stuck in that sort of thinking. And the guilt and all of that comes from not being able to move because you're in a straitjacket then, right? Because you
Yeah.
can't move left, you can't move right. They need you. And however, when you start thinking and sitting back, you realize they don't need me. They need a system. They need something else to carry that process. And I'm going to make it efficient. And then I'm going to build upwards. That's how I started thinking about it.
Brilliant. I mean, in fact, you potentially may have even answered the next question I was going to ask you, because it's systems helps house that which is going to come. In other words, the resources, the infrastructure, the capital, whatever. So you need something to house it, to use it efficiently. Because the next question I was going to ask, like, how do people start thinking long term when short term pressure is real? And I think you mentioned about the straitjacket, you mentioned about all these things, but how do people really start to think long term and build these things long term when the short term pressure is real? So I know you mentioned you switched over from 20 years of working corporate to many adventures. I can imagine you probably have some stories about how shifting had to happen. But like, how did that shift happen inside of you? When did that shift happen?
I think it's for me when it starts with legacy. When I'm building now with not me in mind. I built other things with me in mind and my ego and the power that I'm gonna wield, the money that I'm gonna have. Now I build with the understanding that I won't be here for this build. This business will outlive me, and this business will be inheritance to my family. It will be something that's beyond me. So when I started thinking like that, I started realizing that it's impossible to clone me. It's impossible to clone my qualifications, right? Because we die with that. And so now I can only clone the processes in the business and the thinking so someone can take it forward. I can only take what's in me and build it, write it down, document it, put in a system so someone can work the system without me. Systems need to be built without the mastermind there to allow for the system to operate without him. And all the person needs to do is review the system process, what loops aren't working, to improve the loops for the future. So I started thinking legacy, started thinking outside of myself and my ego. I don't just want a house in Bantry Bay. It's not just about me. It's
It would
about
be nice
what
though. Let's
legacy
be
do I
honest though.
leave. No, I think it's phenomenal, and that should always be the goal. I think for me, it's just saying, how do I get there? But whilst I get there, this won't die with me. Imagine my family
Yeah.
go to Banjul once and they never go back again. It's going to be challenging, you know.
Oh, it's
You know,
heartbreaking.
yeah, it's really tough.
Yeah, no, yeah, Clint, this is a fascinating conversation. I know I like to keep our podcast short and sharp, but we'll continue just a little bit longer, because I think it's probably part of a longer conversation, a more in-depth conversation, which we definitely will have again. If you were to define greatness in your words, or greatness, let's see if I can split it up. Greatness, you have a definition of greatness, and then we'll ask a following up question. What does greatness look like as a South African? I know you speak from a South African perspective, but what does Clint define greatness as, and then what can greatness look like, be defined in the South African context?
I think if I can define it, what does greatness look like to me? I think it's reaching my full potential, and not reaching the potential, just being the potential. I look back and on my life, and if I look at my life, I I have greatness within me. I've overcome certain things that makes me intrinsically great. And so when I look at it now, it's just like it's more being and embodying that person consistently because greatness is already within me. So having done certain things, and I look at my formative years, having overcome certain challenges, I am actually great. I can't come to this point and still seek greatness or want to become a great human being. It's just living that values on a daily basis, right? It's about when I encounter someone, how do I encourage them? How do I speak life into their business, into their vision? Being able to tell them, I know that you have a multi-million rand business in you. Now I'm giving you that vision. How do you now walk that same vision? So I think that is important. And in a South African context, I think all South Africans need to develop a degree of optimism. We have lots of optimism, but I think often in the wrong context. And I'm just saying this is a great country, right? We have great resources, we have great capability, we've overcome massive injustices. And for me as a South African, it's just being able to show up every day, right? And yes, it starts with a simple task. It starts with our behavior. Like, can we be better at driving? Can we be better at our communication? Can we be better at how we treat our fellow human being? Can we start doing good deeds without taking pictures? Can we do certain things for people and just allow it to be, And I think that's what I strive for. And as a South African, and from a South African greatness perspective, um, we have unique unifiers, right? We have phenomenal rugby, we have Rassie Erasmus, we have Siya Kolisi, we have massive unifiers in this country. However, I believe we all are unifiers. And once we take up that mantle of unifying the nation, it will just become so closely knitted. I think for me, greatness is us being good every day, being better every day. And that sort of translates into building a great South Africa in its entirety.
Clint, if you were to look back, if your 10-year-old self was sitting in front of you right now, what would you tell him from your perspective, this 2026 self? How would you encourage him? What would you tell him that would inspire him to continue?
I think I would say that you are enough, and the journey ahead was just getting started. What getting you started for who you are to who you are going to be, and who you need to be in the world. And I think just believe in yourself, man. Just smile, carry on, and you are different because the world needs someone that wants to make a difference. You are different because you are uniquely made, and they won't be a clone of you. And so when you're feeling out, when you're feeling odd, continue because your smile is gonna brighten up someone's day. So continue in that energy. I think that's really what I will tell the 10-year-old version of me.
Well, hopefully, I say that, well, the 10-year-old version already took on amazing things in this world, sitting right in front of me, Mr. Clint Higgins. Well, ladies and gentlemen, just so you know, I'm just going to further support and cement this man here because he's an amazing strategist and someone who moves the needle in a very effective way. He's able to unlock things in your brain, unlock strategy, and also beyond unlocking pathways and strategies, he actually gets you to the front of the right people to move the needle. So, many people talk, he talks and he does, just so you know. And so you can find him on LinkedIn, you can find him in different spaces. And yeah, like when he says he's building something, he really means what he's talking about. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much this is Clint Higgins. And Clint, thank you so much for your time. I know your time is quite precious. But thank you. And hopefully this will be the beginning of many more conversations with you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your time. I just want to say that I wish that your platform just touches more people. I've been following it over the last couple of years, and it's really authentic, real. The yellow jersey, I see you changed slightly this year.
I was gonna put it on, but I thought, but if you see, I still got yellow underneath. This yellow sweater underneath, so it's still.
I like that. It's always remaining true to who you are, and that's really been positive. So I'm closely following that journey, and this is just is your passion, and I know you do lots of work in the back end around massive podcasts. So I wish you all the success for 2026, and may you just unlock everything that's sitting in the year for you, man.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you so much, sir. So, what have we learned about this conversation with Clint? One, I'm now in my yellow jersey, which Clint refers to, the signature yellow jersey. But over and above my brand, greatness isn't dramatic, it is deliberate. It's choosing to learn when quitting is easy. It's choosing relationships over shortcuts, and it's to think in seasons when everything seems to be urgent. It's about being strategic and intentional about how you live your life and how you build your business to get to the future that you want to have. And for some of us, greatness looks like building a business. In others, it's about building stability in your family. For others, it's about being healthy, taking steps to be super healthy and to live a long life. But greatness looks so different to each and every one of us. But the fundamental thing is that it is possible. So ask yourself these 3 questions this week. What do I already have that I'm not leveraging? What systems can I learn instead of fighting? And lastly, what resource can I build slowly but intentionally? If this conversation spoke to you, it made sense with you, it resonated with you, that seems to be the word, then click like and subscribe to hear more conversations like these. This is probably one of a greater body of conversations that I will be having that hopefully will inspire you to live your best life and to live greatness now. So remember, greatness doesn't arrive at once. It arrives when you keep building. Until next time.